Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another how-to video. I'm recording this on November 28th, 2015, and this is going up on January 1st, 2016. Happy New Year, everybody. In this episode, I think we might just finish out our chapter on displaying tabs. This may be the last one, or there may be one more. What we're doing in this chapter is test driving our tab library. This library is going to take a list of tab elements, a list of content elements, and only show the active tab and switch back and forth, allow you to switch back and forth between the other tabs by clicking. Now, in the previous episodes, we implemented all that other functionality. It does hide all the active tabs, all the content except for the active tab. It marks the active tab with the appropriate CSS. The only thing that's left is to modify, to make this show the correct tab when you click. And that is what we are going to work on in this episode. If we look at our to-do, we've only got one item left, and that is to deal with clicks. So that's cool. So as usual, we're going to go through our test-driven development loop. We're going to think, red, green, and then refactor. And you may have been noticing as we go through this that we spend a lot more time on the think steps and the refactor steps than we do on the red and green steps. And even then, we spend more time on the red step, which is about figuring out the design of our code, than we do on the green step. The green step is, as a percentage of the amount of time we spend in development, is very, very small. We spend very little time figuring out how to make the code work, lots of time figuring out what we want to do and how to test it. And that is exactly what we want. It's supposed to be easy to get working code with TDD. So if you're looking at this and thinking, wow, they're spending a lot of time thinking, well, yeah, exactly. That's the way it's supposed to work. What we want is for you to spend a lot of time thinking about how to make great code, not just how to crank something out, but how to make code that's understandable, maintainable, well documented, really clear about what's going on. That's what this is all about. And that's how you make solid, maintainable code, because the cost of software development is not in writing the code the first time. The cost in software development is in maintaining it over the entire life of your product. And that is why we're spending so much time thinking about how to improve the quality of the code. That's what TDD is all about helping you do. All right, enough soapboxing. What we're going to do now is make this go. Now, in the last episode, we factored out our show tab, which I think it was finally the right time to do it. And that should make it really easy to implement the click, because what I'm thinking is that the next piece of code we want to write is basically says, when we have a tab clicked, show that tab. Just that simple. So let's see what we can do. We're going to need a new test, of course. I'm going to put that in the middle. We hide all content elements except the default upon initialization. Let's say we use a class to hide all content elements except the default upon initialization. We style the default tab with the class upon initialization. And then what do? We display. What do we want to do? I think I'm going to do two tests here. One for displaying different content, one for displaying a different tab. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. Let's say it displays appropriate tab, displays a tab when it is clicked. Let's try that. Now, how are we going to do this? We're going to need, we're going to need some tabs and we're going to need some content elements. So let's do this. Let's copy these three tabs here. And let's copy these three content elements here. And let's start out with just tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, and then content 1, content 2, content 3. And then we'll initialize our tabs, and we'll pass in tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, and our content. And our default tab, we'll just make tab 1. Our active tab class, make that active tab, and our hidden content class, make that hidden content. Now, as I look at this, I realize I think we want to factor out these classes in our tests. And And I think we maybe even want to factor out hidden versus not hidden assertions. And maybe even active tab versus not active tab assertions. I don't know. We'll come back to that. At any rate, this is going to switch. What we're going to do is switch content when tab is clicked. I think that's what we want to do here. So what that means is that when tab 2 is clicked, what we'll do is we'll click tab 2, and then we'll assert that content 2 is visible. And also we should assert that content 1 is no longer visible. And if we're really being thorough about this, we're going to want to assert that tab 2 is active and is no longer active. But we might want to do that as a separate test. I'm not sure. So that's what we're going to do here. But as I look at this, I think this asserting content 2 is visible, I think I'd like to refactor first. One thing you will find as you're doing test-driven development is sometimes it's easier to refactor your code and then write the new feature than it is to write the new feature and then refactor. And that same thing applies to the tests. You'll notice we're spending a lot of time refactoring our tests. That is absolutely appropriate. You should be refactoring your tests as well as your production code. So I think refactoring our tests before we implement this will make it easier to implement. So let's make sure this is all still working. And it is, because we haven't done any of our assertions yet. And then let's modify our code to not have this assert equal, but instead say something like assert content visible or assert content hidden. I think that will really improve the quality of our tests here. Now we can do that by taking this hide class, factoring this into a new variable called, let's call it hidden content. We'll put that up here. Like that. And let's call it, and then what we can do is replace this with hidden content and this with hidden content. And that still works. Excellent. So by using this constant, now we should be able to factor out a new function called assert content hidden. And then we can just pass in content 1. Before we do that though, let's go ahead and take this and do it everywhere. So hidden content, and then here, well, actually here, I don't think we want to do that. We'll just do it this way. So now we should be able to say assert content hidden, content 1, element 1. And the question is, do we want to pass in this hidden content variable? I think so, because if we have the constant here, so we could just assume that we have it, but it might be better to make it more explicit. I don't know. I think it's going to be prettier this way. Even though it's not quite as explicit, I'm going to go ahead and go for it. Yeah. So we'll need to write a function, assert content hidden, and it's going to take the element, and it's going to take the message, and it's going to be basically exactly this, only with the element and a message. Well, really, that's not just a message, that's the element name. And that should still work. And it does. So we don't need this. And here we can say assert content hidden element, or content 3, element 3. And that should work as well, and it does. Good. Now we need an assert content visible. And it's very similar. Copy that, paste it in. Rename this to element. There we go. And I'll put these down here. I like to have my functions, my helper functions at the bottom. A lot of people put them at the top. That's sort of a vestige of programming languages that required functions to be declared before they were used. But I find that code reads more clearly if I put the important functions at the top rather than the helper functions. That is a bit of a personal quirk of mine, and you'll find that most people prefer it the other way around. Which way you like, it's totally up to you, but follow whatever your team likes to do. Let's go ahead and check that in. So we factored out assert content hidden and visible helper functions. This, by the way, is exactly why I prefer the TDD style of assertions rather than the BDD style. As you'll recall, the BDD style says content1.should equal blah, blah, blah. I find it easier to make custom assertions when you're just writing them like this. And that just fits better with the TDD style than the BDD style. So having done that, we want to do the same thing with our tabs. So let's do that. We'll say assert tab active, tab 1. And let's see, we'll need to, that's the way we're going to do that, but this needs to be the active tab class. Call it active class like that. And this will be active tab. And that should still work. Good. And now we should be able to say assert tab active. And pull this one out. Like that. And it's not tab 1 that's active, it's our default tab that should be active. Let's say it this way, should be active. That should still work. Yep. So we don't need that anymore. And now we need an assert tab inactive. Yeah. Usually prefer not to have functions with names that are so similar that, you know, just a 1 or 2 character difference, because it's easy to make a mistake with a typo. But in this case, I'm not thinking of a better name right now. Let's see, for this, we're going to want exactly this. And that will be element, and this will be element name. And that should work. And it does. So we factored out assert, tab active, and inactive. Good stuff. Okay, that is a good spot for us to stop for this episode. Again, what we have done here is we have refactored our test code to make it easier to write the tests that we want to write. So next time what we're going to do is we're going to actually finish implementing that click test, and we will implement the production code. And that will bring us to the end of our tabs library chapter. Your exercise for this time, go ahead and do what we did here, implement the start of that click test, and factor out the assert content hidden and assert tab active methods and their opposites. And again, the reason for doing this is to make implementing the click test easier. So look around for other opportunities to make that test easier to write as well. See if you can find anything. And if you do, go and implement those as well. For those of you doing the challenge exercises, go ahead and finish implementing the click test so that it actually does click the tab and that you have your assertions in there, and implement the click handler in the production code. Remember to take small steps as you go. That is it for this time. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.